Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to go over some homework about z-scores. So at the top here I've put the two formulas that you need. The one on the left is for calculating a z-score and the one on the right is for calculating a data value from its z-score. So for both of these formulas, a data value is called x, the z-score of the data value is called z, the mean of the data set is mu, which is the Greek m, and then the standard deviation of the data set is sigma, which is Greek s. So that's what all these things stand for. And these are actually the same two equations. They've just been, the one on the left has been solved for z, and the one on the right has been solved for x. But you can get from one to the other if you need to using algebra. All right, so let's look at the first section. There are 78 private four-year colleges and universities in PA. During 2019, the mean number of students was approximately 3668, and the standard deviation was approximately 4008. SU had 2,305 students. What was our z-score? Okay, so if we're asking for the z-score, then we're going to use this formula right here. And we're just going to plug in all the little pieces and parts except for z, because that's what we're going to find. All right, so x is going to be the data value, that's 2305. Mu is the mean, which was given up here, it's 3668. Sigma is the standard deviation, it's right here, 4008. There it is, and then you just put this into a calculator and see what it actually is. Okay, so I am getting negative 0.34, and for z-scores, I usually round to 2 decimal places. Okay, for the next one here, Bryn Athen had 2,000. Why am I having trouble saying numbers today? Bryn Athen had 223 students. What was its z-score? Okay, so we're going to repeat the same exercise right here. I'm just going to copy paste it, but we're going to put in 223 instead of 2305. All right, and then we're just going to plug that into the calculator again. Okay, so now I'm getting negative, oops, taking in the wrong spot. Now I'm getting negative 0.86 if I round to 2 places. So what these mean is SU's number of students is about 1/3 of a standard deviation below the mean. So we are indeed below the mean. You guys can see that yourselves. That's less than the mean of 3668. And Bryn Athen is obviously even further below the mean. 223 is very small. So but it's not even quite a standard deviation below the mean, and that is mostly because the main reason why the standard deviation is so big is because there are a few colleges and universities that have a really large number of students that are much greater than 3668, like Villanova, for example, and Lehigh. Okay, so how many students would there be at a college with a z-score of 1.5, and then the same question but with negative 0.5? So for this, what you're going to do is use the other version of the equation where you create a data value using a z-score. Okay, and it doesn't have to be a real z-score, it could be a made-up one like this. So there's probably not a real college that has this z-score. So we're going to use this version of the formula where it's solved for x, and then we're going to plug in everything except x, because that's what we're trying to find. So mean mu 3668 plus z is 1.5, and then sigma is 4008. So we are going 1.5 standard deviations above the mean, start at the mean, go up by 1.5 of these standard deviations. Formula should make sense. All right, let me put this into the calculator. Okay, so I'm getting 9,680. And then if I do the same thing, but for negative 0.5, just make sure that you get the negative in there correctly. So if I'm adding negative 0.5, then I'm really going to end up subtracting this. So 4008. Okay. Okay, so I'm getting 1664. And this should make sense as an answer because SU had the z-score of negative 0.34. Bryn Athen had negative 0.86. Negative 0.5 is between those two, and this answer is between the number of students at these two colleges. Okay, so the size of it should make sense. If you get something weird like 16,000 or something, then you know you did something wrong. That's the good thing about actually plugging in these numbers to the calculator. You can kind of check your own work, see if it makes sense. All right, so now let's look at the public four-year colleges and universities. So there are only 18 of them. And during 2019, the mean number of students was approximately 11,980, so quite a bit bigger. And the standard deviation as well is bigger, 12,174. So if there was a public college with the same z-score as SU from question 1, how many students would it have had? Right, so basically, if SU was a public college instead of a private one, how many students would it have if it was located in the same place in the distribution? Okay, so we're trying to create a data value. So we're going to use this second formula here for x. And then we just plug in all the little pieces and parts. So now we're using a different mean. We're using this public mean of 11,980. We're going to use the z-score from question 1, which was negative 0.34. Okay. And then we're going to use the standard deviation from this section for the public colleges, so 12,174. And then we just put this in the calculator. Okay, so I'm getting approximately 7841. Now, because we rounded the z-score to only 2 decimal places, to the 100th place, and then we're multiplying it by a number that's in the 10,000s, there's likely to be a pretty good amount of round-off error coming from that. So if you wanted to do this a little more accurately, you could back up here and take the non-rounded version of the z-score. In other words, this fraction right here, put that in your calculator instead, and so you're not rounding this 0.34. And you might get, it could be as different as like maybe a couple hundred students or something. So let me actually try, let me do this and see what it looks like. Okay, this might look a little bit intimidating, but like if you have a, let me take that part off. If you have a scientific or a graphing calculator, you can just type this in on one line, just use the parentheses key, put parentheses around this top part too when you're entering it, it's no problem. If you're using a for function, yeah, you're likely to maybe mess up some parts. But I have a scientific, so let me go ahead and do this. Okay, so it was only off by 1 student, but whatever. Okay, so it was a slightly more accurate version if you do it that way, but it was only 1 student off in the end. All right, so number 6, if there were a public college with the same z-score as Bryn-Athyn, how many students would it have had? Okay, so we're going to do the same thing here that we did on the last question. We're going to use the formula for getting an x value, a data value, if I can properly select it. All right, and in fact, I'm just going to go ahead and take the whole version to there, and then I'll replace the SU z-score here with the Bryn-Athyn z-score, because this is the mean and the standard deviation that I want. So my Bryn-Athyn z-score was, I'll just use the rounded version, negative 0.86, put it right there, and I'll go ahead and get my calculator answer. Okay, so I'm getting 1510, which makes sense that it should be smaller than the SU number, and it's also quite a bit below the mean, which Bryn-Athyn also was amongst the private schools. Okay, so the last 2 questions here are to calculate z-scores using the public college numbers for the mean and the standard deviation. So we're going back to the z-score formula, this one, and now we're just going to use the mean and the standard deviation from this set of questions, the public ones. So the mean is here. I'll go ahead and fill in these parts. So we'll put the data value in there in a second. So that's the mean, and standard deviation is here. And I'm just going to copy this down to the next or the last problem as well. So do it really efficiently. You guys are doing this on paper, hopefully not on a computer, but I can copy paste, so haha. All right, so the data value now that I'm going to put in for X is the Penn State one, the main campus, 45,233. This is a bonkers number of students. And for this one, it's a made up number of 5,000. I can already see 5,000, it's between the SU number and the Bryn-Athyn number. So I know it's going to be, the z-score is going to be between the SU one and the Bryn-Athyn one. And I can already see this Penn State number is way above the mean. So it's going to be a big positive z-score. All right, let me put these in my calculator. Okay, so here's what I'm getting for both of them. So for Penn State, yep, it was a big positive z-score. And even though this seems like a huge number of students, you guys see it still wasn't that big of a z-score. It was only between 2 and 3. This is kind of typical from real world data. Like, you almost never see a z-score that's above 3. That would be really extreme. And then for the 5,000, yeah, the number came out. The z was between the one for SU and the one for Bren Athen, as we knew that it had to be, because 5,000 was between the number of students at those two schools. Okay, that's it for this set of questions, and I hope it all made sense to you, and I'll see you in class.